So I want you to imagine giving a computer a strict knowledge cutoff of the year 1911.
Okay, 1911.
Right. You feed it all the scientific papers, all the physics theories, every mathematical framework that existed up until that exact moment in time, and absolutely nothing else.
Wow, so no modern physics at all.
None. And then you turn it on, you step back, and you watch to see if it can independently discover the theory of general relativity.
Just completely from scratch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just like Albert Einstein did in 1915. And the wild thing is, that isn't some, science fiction thought experiment anymore. That is the actual literal test being proposed right now by the people building our future, just to determine if artificial general intelligence has finally arrived.
It is a phenomenal benchmark, honestly, because, well, it forces us to ask what intelligence actually is. I mean, is it just retrieving information really well, or is it the ability to synthesize the fundamental physics of reality and, create something entirely new?
Right. And that distinction is really the beating heart of what we are unpacking today. Because if you've ever felt like the future is just accelerating way too fast, or like the rules of the world are being rewritten while you are just trying to get through your Tuesday, you are in the exact right place for this.
Oh, absolutely.
We have a massive, staggering stack of source material on the table today for this deep dive. I mean, we are looking at manifestos from tech CEOs at NVIDIA and Palantir. We are dissecting these incredibly dense, cutting-edge AI research papers on the missing layers of machine intelligence.
And it gets weirder from there.
It really does, because we are also diving into a biohacker's heavily funded quest for literal biological immortality, complete with a manifesto released on the spring equinox.
Naturally.
Naturally. And somehow, weaving through all of this high-stakes futurism, we have this deep psychological retrospective on the pop culture of the year 2016.
Which I know looks like an absolutely chaotic mix of subjects on the surface.
Yeah.
But when you synthesize these documents, a singular, incredibly powerful through line emerges.
Yeah, let's talk about that through line.
Well, the research says we are moving out of an era called digital Taylorism. Basically, for over a century, the corporate and economic world has operated on rigid efficiency. Strict hierarchies, narrow playbooks. You were just a cog in a machine.
Right. Follow the rules, do your job.
Exactly. But these sources are screaming that this era is totally dead. We are entering the era of return on intelligence.
Return on intelligence. And that leads directly to the mission of our deck dive today. For you listening, the core theme connecting all these wild threads is how this massive disruption, AGI, radical life extension, is actually offering humanity this profound, unprecedented opportunity.
An opportunity to reevaluate everything.
Exactly. It's the opportunity to finally see the value in literally everything, including the things we used to dismiss as just noise or deficits or messy human flaws. This is really about how we make peace with planet Earth, how we make peace with this rapidly approaching AI future, and ultimately how we make peace with ourselves.
Which means the rules of what makes human beings valuable are changing in real time.
Yeah.
And if we want to understand that, we really have to start with the tectonic plate shifting beneath all of this, artificial general intelligence.
The AGI timeline debate. Because looking at the sources, there are just massive fundamental contradictions among the people who are literally building this technology right now.
Oh, absolutely. The disagreement is wild.
Right. You have NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang sitting down for this marathon interview, and he essentially says we are already knocking on the door of AGI. But you have to look really closely at his definition.
Yes, his definition is very specific.
He says if an AI can make $1 billion autonomously, or pass a broad, rigorous set of human exams like the bar exam or the GMAT, then boom, it's AGI.
Right. So Huang is looking at episodic agentic intelligence. Basically, can the system execute a task and generate massive economic value?
The billion-dollar question, literally.
Literally. And if you look at the incentives, I mean, NVIDIA sells the infrastructure. They sell the GPUs that power these models. So an economic output-based definition of AGI perfectly justifies the massive, unprecedented capital expenditure we are seeing across the whole tech sector.
That makes total sense.
He believes that specific threshold could be reached within 5 years, or honestly, even now, depending on how softly you define those parameters of autonomy.
But then you flick to the next document in our stack. On the exact same day Huang is saying all this, you have DeepMind CEO Demis Hassabis just slamming on the brakes.
Completely different perspective.
Hassabis is saying we are still 5 years and 1 or 2 major scientific breakthroughs away from true AGI. I And he is the one who proposed that 1911 Einstein test I mentioned at the top.
Because Hassabis is demanding something fundamentally deeper from the system. He doesn't just want an agent that can game an exam or optimize a high-frequency trading algorithm.
Right.
He is looking for a system that can actually understand the underlying causal physics of reality.
Let's ground this in an analogy, because I think the difference between these two views is just crucial for you to understand where the world is actually heading.
It really is.
So Huang's definition of AGI kind of feels like a high school student who has a photographic memory.
Right.
They memorize every past exam paper, they know exactly what the teacher wants to hear, they get a perfect score, and they land a high-paying job. They execute perfectly.
Yes, they are a perfect execution engine.
But Hassabis's definition is the student who actually understands the laws of physics well enough to realize the textbook is wrong, and then they write a completely new one.
That is a brilliant distinction, and it perfectly sets up the mechanical problem that's outlined in one of our core research papers today.
The missing layer one, right?
Yes, the paper titled The Missing Layer of AGI. This paper argues that current large language models, the LLMs we all use every day, are fundamentally System 1 thinkers.
Okay, let's break that down for a second. System 1 versus System 2. This is Daniel Kahneman's framework, right?
Exactly. In human psychology, System 1 is your fast, intuitive, automatic thinking. Like, if I ask you what 2 plus 2 is, you don't actually calculate it.
No, the answer 4 just sort of pops into my head.
Right, it just appears. But System 2 is your slow, deliberate, analytical thinking. If I ask you to multiply 17 by 24, you have to stop.
Yeah, I'd have to hold numbers in my working memory, carry the 1, apply an algorithm. It takes effort.
Precisely. So the paper is saying current AI is just a massive System 1.
Interesting. So they are just incredible pattern matchers.
Exactly. They possess this vast repository of patterns because they've ingested, well, basically the entire internet. But relying on them to achieve true reasoning AGI is fundamentally flawed.
Because they aren't actually reasoning.
No. Think of an LLM as a brilliant speed-reading librarian. This librarian has memorized where every single word in every single book in the library is located. So if you ask a question, the librarian can instantly retrieve the most statistically probable string of words to answer you. But the librarian doesn't actually understand what those words mean. That is System 1.
Right, it's just predicting the next most likely token. It's like an incredibly sophisticated autocomplete on your phone.
Exactly. So to get to AGI, to get to that System 2, you need the scholar. The scholar sits down, reads the books retrieved by the librarian, and synthesizes a brand new philosophy by applying logic, constraint, and causal reasoning.
And the research paper calls this missing layer coordination physics, right? And semantic anchoring.
Yes.
So let's unpack coordination physics, because that sounds like a term we are all going to hear a lot in the next few years. Walk me through the actual mechanics of what that means in an AI architecture.
Well, in current models, the neural network just fires based on weights and biases to produce an output, fast and automatic. But coordination physics proposes adding a meta layer on top of that.
A meta layer, okay.
Before the AI gives you an answer, it spawns multiple internal subagents. And it forces these agents to engage in what the paper calls behavior-modulated debate.
Wait, so the AI literally argues with itself?
Yes. Imagine you ask the AI to solve a really complex supply chain problem. Agent A proposes a solution. But instead of just spitting out that solution to you, the coordination layer forces Agent B to actively try to break Agent A's logic.
Oh, that's wild.
Right. And then a third agent, acting as this sort of Socratic judge, evaluates the whole debate. It's looking for logical inconsistencies or hallucinations.
It's fact-checking its own internal monologue.
Exactly. And it anchors the concepts to semantic reality, meaning it actively checks if the proposed solution actually obeys the laws of physics and economics. Only after this rigorous internal System 2 debate does it finalize the output.
I love that. We are essentially trying to teach AI how to disagree productively, which is deeply ironic because human beings are currently terrible at that.
A little bit of irony there, yes.
But here is where it gets really interesting for you, listening right now. If the future of AI relies on this complex System 2 reasoning, and if it completely masters the execution of tasks, what does that mean for human workers? Like, what actually happens to us?
This is where we have to look at the manifesto from Palantir's CEO, Alex Karp. And it ties directly into our theme of finding value in everything.
How so?
Well, Karp argues that in the generative AI era, execution tasks are entirely commoditized. Anything that you can write a standard operating procedure for, any rigid playbook, is now useless as a human skill.
Because the AI can just run the playbook faster.
Faster, cheaper, and with way fewer errors than any human ever could.
Okay, but let's be real for a second here. Corporations have spent the last 100 years actively punishing people who don't follow the playbook.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the entire education system is built on rewarding people who sit still, follow instructions, and color inside the lines. Are we really supposed to believe that overnight, Wall Street and Silicon Valley are going to just start valuing the rebels and the rule breakers?
They don't have a choice. The economic incentives have completely inverted. When execution is free, the only thing that commands a premium is non-playbook innovation.
Non-playbook innovation.
Yes. The ability to look at a system, realize the rules are fundamentally flawed, and invent a completely new paradigm. The sources highlight this profound, almost tectonic shift in how the tech industry is viewing human talent right now.
It's a massive pivot.
Historically, the corporate world demanded neurotypical conformity. They treated human cognitive variability as noise in the system. If your brain worked differently, you were viewed as having a deficit.
But now that variability is becoming the ultimate strategic asset. The research specifically points to a massive pivot happening in tech toward neurodivergent talent. We're talking about individuals with autism, ADHD, dyslexia.
Yes.
These are historically marginalized groups in that traditional sit-at-your-desk-and-nod workforce.
Exactly. Let's look at the cognitive mechanics of why this is happening. The sources note that autistic professionals often process information with what neurologists call local coherence.
Stop right there. What physically is happening in the brain with local coherence? Why does that actually matter for AI?
Well, in a neurotypical brain, there is a strong tendency toward global processing. When you walk into a room, your brain immediately tries to grasp the big picture, the social dynamics, the overall context, and it often smooths over the fine details to get to a quick conclusion.
Which is efficient for social survival.
Exactly. But autistic brains often prioritize local processing. They see the individual granular details with extraordinary clarity and precision before they assemble the larger picture.
They see the individual trees perfectly before they even register the forest.
Yes. And socially, this translates to a vastly diminished susceptibility to social conformity.
Wow.
Think about it. A neurotypical employee might sit in a meeting, spot a flaw in the AI model, but realize everyone else, including the boss, is just nodding along. Global processing says, don't rock the boat, just agree with the group.
Right, preserve the social harmony.
But local coherence says, the math is wrong, and I do not care who is offended by that fact.
Which is exactly what you need. If you're trying to build an ethical, safe, artificial general intelligence, and you need to conduct adversarial testing, meaning you are actively trying to break the model to find its hidden biases, you want someone who refuses to conform to the expected pattern.
You want procedural fairness and ethical stubbornness. They have an absolute aversion to taking logical shortcuts.
That makes perfect sense.
Dyslexia is another example highlighted in the text. If the standard playbook for reading and processing information fundamentally does not work for your brain, you are forced, from a very young age, to invent entirely new, generative approaches to problem solving.
You have to build your own playbooks.
Exactly. And that forced adaptation builds the exact kind of nonlinear thinking that a commoditized AI simply cannot replicate.
I have to bring up this specific detail from the Alex Karp interview because it perfectly encapsulates this whole idea. He talks about his family dog, Rosita.
Oh, the pound story.
Yes. When they went to the pound to adopt a dog, they didn't look for the most obedient one. They specifically chose Rosita because she was a troublemaker. Her intelligence actually manifested in figuring out how to break herself and the other dogs out of their cages.
She refused to follow the rules of the pound.
Exactly. And Karp argues that this exact unconventional rule-breaking intelligence is what is required to actually change the world right now.
It's a really powerful analogy, and it raises an incredible point about making peace with our own nature. For decades, society labeled these cognitive traits as disorders, as things that needed to be fixed or medicated away so people could fit into the digital Taylorism machine.
But now, we are realizing that the exact capabilities required to align and safely guide superintelligence are found in the very minds we previously sidelined.
We're moving from viewing humans as broken cogs in a machine to actually valuing their unique adaptive judgment.
We are finally seeing the value in the noise. I love that.
But we do have to pivot here because intelligence, whether it is the non-playbook human mind or the System 2 AI, it does not just float around in the ether.
No, it doesn't.
It is intensely physical. It requires a substrate.
Right. So we're realizing that human brains are incredibly efficient, diverse reasoning engines. I mean, they run on about 20 watts of power. That is roughly a dim light bulb.
Barely any energy at
But
all.
the artificial brain we are trying to build to replace them, it is the most inefficient, power-hungry machine in human history. To replicate a single non-playbook thought, we are literally draining the electrical grid. We cannot have this grand AGI revolution without making peace with planet Earth.
The energy demands outlined in the sources are almost difficult to comprehend. I mean, let's look at the hard numbers.
Hit me.
Training a single state-of-the-art large language model takes over 50 gigawatt-hours of electricity per run. To put that in perspective, that could power thousands of homes for an entire year. And that's just the training phase.
Just to teach it the patterns.
Mm-hmm.
But the inference phase is even crazier. The inference is just people actually using the model. Asking ChatGPT to write an email or generate a funny image. The text estimates that ChatGPT inference alone consumes roughly 1 gigawatt-hour every single day.
A gigawatt-hour every day. And the projections are terrifying for grid operators. AI data centers are expected to consume 4 to 8% of total global electricity by 2030.
4 to 8% of the entire planet's electricity.
Yes. And if we factor in the exponential growth of these models scaling up to achieve that System 2 reasoning we discussed, that number could surge even higher. The current public power grid simply cannot handle it.
Which perfectly explains the absolutely wild real-world reactions we are seeing from big tech. The grid is full, so they are going behind the meter. They were literally bypassing the public infrastructure to secure their own power.
It's a full-on nuclear renaissance.
Because nuclear is the only baseload power source that can deliver massive 24/7 carbon-free electricity, right?
Exactly. Look at Microsoft. They recently signed a massive agreement to restart Unit 1 at the 3 Mile Island nuclear facility.
Which is wild to think about.
Right. A site famous for its partial meltdown in 1979 is being brought back online specifically to feed AI data centers.
And it's not just legacy reactors. Google is partnering with Kairos Tower to build small modular reactors, or SMRs. Amazon is heavily investing in nuclear for AWS. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, is personally pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into nuclear fusion startups like Helion Energy.
We should probably explain the mechanics of these SMRs because they are a key part of the strategy.
Yeah, how are they different from traditional nuclear?
Well, traditional nuclear plants are massive, bespoke construction projects. They take decades and billions of dollars to build. Small modular reactors are designed to be built in a factory setting, shipped on a truck, and assembled on-site.
So they are like prefabricated nuclear plants?
Yes. And they use advanced coolants like molten salt instead of highly pressurized water, which theoretically makes them much safer and much more efficient.
So tech companies want to just plop a mini nuclear reactor right next to their data centers to ensure they never run out of juice. It's wild. But it's not just about energy. It's also about the raw materials required to build this future. And this is where we really have to talk about the geopolitics.
Absolutely.
Now, before we get into this, we're going to dive into some intense geopolitical analysis here, involving figures like Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, and Palantir's Alex Karp. And I want to be crystal clear for you listening. Our job today is strictly to unpack the architecture of their arguments exactly as they are presented in the source material.
Right.
We are absolutely not endorsing any specific political playbook, ideology, or candidate. We are simply mapping out the reality of what this hard power axis is actually proposing regarding national security and technology.
With that necessary context established, the sources suggest a monumental shift in economic philosophy. The era of the free market fantasy is ending, particularly when it comes to technology that dictates national security. The argument from this hard power axis is that to maintain technological dominance, especially against rapidly advancing adversaries like China, the United States can no longer rely solely on the invisible hand of the market to sort things out.
The text explicitly uses the phrase, a command economy for national survival, which I have to admit sounds a bit like the backdrop for a dystopian sci-fi novel.
It does.
But the sources argue it is happening right now in reality. The government isn't outright nationalizing companies or seizing the means of production, but it is heavily directing them. It is actively picking winners and losers based on one metric.
Does this company help achieve undeniable AI and military dominance?
Exactly. And this shift changes traditional diplomacy into brutal supply chain management. Alex Karp refers to this emerging structure as the technological republic.
And this republic requires infinite energy, infinite raw materials, and infinite compute. And currently, it is starving for all three.
Let's talk about the specific examples in the text because they are eye-opening. There is a mention of Project Stargate. This is a reported $500 billion government-backed AI infrastructure initiative, $500 billion.
Staggering amount of money.
The U.S. military is essentially transforming into a massive procurement department just to guarantee that American AI companies have the supercomputers they need.
And it extends to the literal dirt beneath our feet. I mean, why is there a sudden, intense strategic interest in Greenland?
Yeah, Greenland. Why?
According to the sources, it's because China recently choked off the export supply of specific rare earth elements, notably dysprosium and terbium.
Okay, let's explain the how here. Why do we care so much about dysprosium and terbium? What do they actually do physically?
Well, to build the physical manifestations of AI, so humanoid robots, advanced drones, and even the massive wind turbines needed to generate clean energy, you need incredibly powerful permanent magnets. Usually, these are neodymium magnets. The problem is neodymium magnets lose their magnetism when they get too hot, and high-performance electric motors get very, very hot.
So the joints of your Boston Dynamics robot would just stop working mid-sprint. It would just collapse.
Exactly. So dysprosium and terbium are added to the magnet alloy to significantly raise its Curie temperature. That's the temperature at which it loses its magnetic properties.
Oh, I see.
Without these specific elements, you simply cannot build high-performance, high-heat electric motors. And currently, China controls the vast majority of the processing for these elements. By choking the supply, they are essentially trying to handicap the West's ability to build the robotics layer of the AI revolution.
So suddenly, the ground in Greenland, which apparently contains untapped reserves of these exact rare earths, along with copper, lithium, and uranium, becomes a strategic asset vital to national survival. We are realizing that the cloud isn't just floating in the sky, it's pulled aggressively from the Earth.
But we really must look at the flip side of this equation, because the sources make a strong case that this isn't just a story of extraction. It's not just humanity pillaging the Earth to feed the machines.
It's not.
The argument is that AI is actually the ultimate tool to give back, to achieve a return on intelligence for the planet itself.
How so? Because right now it just sounds like we are boiling the oceans to generate text.
I know it seems that way. But the reality is that human intelligence alone has proven fundamentally inadequate to manage the Earth sustainably. Our planetary systems are just too complex, too interwoven for our System 1 and even our limited human System 2 thinking to optimize. AI brings the necessary computational scale.
Right. The sources give some specific examples of this. AI is now predicting complex weather patterns and extreme climate events with unprecedented accuracy, far outperforming traditional meteorological models. It is actively optimizing global land use and agricultural yields to prevent topsoil depletion.
It is analyzing petabytes of satellite imagery in real time to track biodiversity. It can instantly identify illegal logging roads or poaching activity in protected rainforests.
Oh.
And going back to energy, AI is dramatically accelerating research into nuclear fusion by modeling plasma containment fields. It's also discovering novel material combinations that could eventually replace those exact rare earth elements like dysprosium, freeing us from that geopolitical chokehold.
The overarching premise is fascinating. AI might be the only tool powerful enough, the only intelligence vast enough to help us actually make peace with the planet's ecological limits. We have to push through this massive energy expenditure right now to build the tool that saves the ecosystem later.
It is the ultimate systemic optimization, which honestly creates a perfect, albeit radical, transition.
Okay, we go.
If AI is the ultimate tool for optimizing the macro systems of the planet, what happens when we turn that exact same optimization logic inward? What happens when we apply that immense, unforgiving computational power to the microsystems of the human body?
We are about to go down a wild rabbit hole. This brings us to perhaps the most provocative part of our deep dive today, the heavily funded, mathematically driven attempt to literally defeat death itself.
Enter Bryan Johnson in the philosophy of immortalism.
If you aren't familiar with Bryan Johnson, he is a 47-year-old tech entrepreneur who sold a payment processing company to PayPal for around $800 million.
Right.
But he didn't just buy a yacht and retire. Instead, he spends approximately $2 million a year on something he calls Project Blueprint.
And it is intense.
He employs a team of doctors to track over 70 of his organs. He takes over 100 specific supplements a day. He eats a perfectly measured vegan diet. He goes to bed at exactly 8:30 p.m. He even straps on a monitor at night to track his penile erections as a biomarker for cardiovascular health.
And his stated goal is not just to live a little longer. He is aiming to achieve longevity escape velocity by the year 2039.
Escape velocity.
Yes. The concept is that by 2039, medical technology will be advancing so rapidly that for every year you are alive, science will add more than a year to your remaining life expectancy. He genuinely believes his generation could be the first in human history that does not actually have to die.
To really understand the mindset here, we have to look at the Immortalism Manifesto that Johnson released in the sources. And he released it very deliberately on the spring equinox of 2026.
The symbolism is heavy there. The equinox represents the absolute balance of day and night and the transition from winter dormancy to spring rebirth.
But the manifesto itself isn't poetic. It's aggressively scientific. It attempts to completely reframe how humanity views mortality. It argues that for 4.5 billion years, death was treated as a mystical boundary, a spiritual inevitability. But Johnson argues it is simply a thermodynamic process. He uses a strict mathematical formula in the manifesto. A of t must be greater than or equal to b of t.
Let's break down the mechanics of that formula because it is the absolute core of his philosophy. It is a battle against the second law of thermodynamics, entropy.
Okay, so what is the b of t?
In biological systems, B of T represents the forces of degradation, cellular damage, DNA mutations, the accumulation of senescent zombie cells, oxidative stress.
And A of t?
A of T represents the system's capacity to repair that damage.
So when you are young, your repair mechanisms, your A of t, easily outpace the degradation.
Yeah.
But as you age, the repair slows down.
Precisely. When repair falls permanently behind entropy, the system decays and eventually collapses. You die. Therefore, Johnson's argument is that death is not a mystical law of nature. It is simply a mechanical engineering failure, and engineering failures can be solved through rigorous optimization.
Okay, I have to stop and push back on this because reading through the actual day-to-day reality of the Blueprint Protocol,
Yeah.
it sounds incredibly dystopic to a lot of people.
Many people feel that way.
You are essentially surrendering your entire lived experience to an algorithm. You are tracking every fluid, every heartbeat, eating exactly what the data tells you, sleeping exactly when the data tells you, never deviating for a slice of cake or a late-night conversation. Johnson literally says in the text, "My mind no longer decides. Have we lost our free will, our humanity, just to buy more time on the clock?"
That is the exact tension Johnson attempts to address with his concept of the rascal mind and a philosophy he calls zeroism. He argues that the human mind, our conscious decision-making apparatus, is historically terrible at making choices that promote long-term survival.
I mean, he's not wrong about that. We eat highly processed junk food. We stay up until 2 a.m. doom scrolling on our phones. We skip exercise because we feel lazy.
Exactly. And Johnson frames these everyday actions in incredibly stark, almost moral terms. He calls them acts of violence against the self.
He has this concept of evening Bryan versus morning Bryan. He says that if evening Bryan decides to eat a whole pizza and drink 3 beers at 10 p.m., he is committing a literal act of violence against morning Bryan, who has to wake up feeling terrible, inflamed, and biologically closer to death.
So, by outsourcing his decision-making to the data, to the algorithm, he believes he isn't losing his freedom at all. He argues he's gaining absolute biological alignment. He is aligning his 35 trillion individual cells for optimal, harmonious health. He views this surrender of the rascal mind as the ultimate biological upgrade.
And this ties back perfectly to our earlier discussion about artificial intelligence. I mean, the biggest existential question in tech right now is AI alignment.
Right.
How do we make sure a superintelligent AI doesn't destroy humanity because its goals don't align with ours?
Right.
Johnson is essentially asking, how can we possibly hope to align an artificial superintelligence with human values if we can't even align our own biological habits? If we can't stop slowly eating ourselves to death, how do we program a machine to value life?
It is a profound philosophical pivot. He argues that society currently operates a dichotomy. Our entire system rewards the velocity of money and the skills of consumption over the actual preservation of life.
We reward people for working 80-hour weeks.
Exactly, stressing themselves into early heart attacks just to increase corporate shareholder value. He wants to transition humanity to an immortalism economy where we measure value completely differently. He even proposes that instead of measuring a nation's gross domestic product, we should measure its biological GDP.
Biological GDP.
Yes, the aggregate biological age, health span, and cellular resilience of its citizens.
It's a fascinating thought experiment, but I want to bring you, the listener, into this directly. Imagine it is the year 2039. The AI has cracked the code. Longevity, escape velocity is real.
Huh.
The treatments exist to keep your cells indefinitely repairing themselves. You can choose to live for centuries. The immediate question is, should you? And perhaps more practically, who actually gets to?
Which brings us to the massive ethical fault line of this entire movement, what the sources refer to as the bio divide.
Right, because immortality isn't going to be cheap.
No, it is certainly not. The sources detail a stark contrast. On one side, you have the Immortals program. This is the top-tier, bleeding-edge protocol that reportedly costs upwards of $1 million a year.
$1 million.
It includes experimental therapies like targeted gene manipulations, stem cell therapies, and rigorous clinical monitoring. It also includes something called plasmapheresis with albumin-rich saline.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of that. What is albumin-rich saline actually doing to the body?
In simple terms, it's a profound blood filtering process. As you age, your blood plasma accumulates those senescent zombie cells we mentioned, along with inflammatory proteins. These are essentially the garbage products of cellular metabolism that your body can no longer clear out efficiently.
And they just float around in there.
Yes, they circulate and cause systemic inflammation, which directly accelerates aging. Plasmapheresis physically removes your plasma and replaces it with a pristine saline solution enriched with albumin, which is a vital protein. You are mechanically flushing the entropy out of your vascular system.
So that is the $1 million-a-year option. Meanwhile, the sources mention a $2,000 DIY version of the Blueprint protocol. And this is basically, get a standard blood test twice a year, eat a lot of vegetables, exercise for 6 hours a week, take some basic vitamins, and prioritize your sleep, which, to be clear, is fantastic medical advice.
It is. Most of us don't even do that.
Exactly. But there's a massive, unbridgeable gap between eating broccoli and getting your entire blood volume filtered and your genes edited.
The fear articulated in the ethical analysis is social hyperstratification. If we don't solve the economic distribution of these radical life extension technologies, we will literally create a biological caste system. We will have a ruling class of wealthy individuals who live for 200 years in peak physical condition, while the working class continues to suffer and die at 75 from preventable age-related diseases.
Death will become a disease that only happens to the poor.
Exactly.
And the ethical questions go even deeper than just the economics. Let's look at the article from the Prindle Institute for Ethics and the Jubilee debate featured in our source stack. What happens to human society if we actually succeed in defeating death? Do we really want forever billionaires? Do we want forever dictators?
That is terrifying.
Imagine if rulers like Vladimir Putin or Kim Jong-un had access to biological immortality. Humanity has historically relied on the literal changing of the guard, on the passing of generations, to achieve social and political progress.
Yes, the debate refers to this as clogging the evolutionary pipeline. Without the constant turnover of generations, does humanity culturally and intellectually stagnate? Does a world filled with immortals lose its capacity for fresh, disruptive, non-playbook ideas because the old guard never ever leaves power?
And then there's the psychological problem, the problem of profound boredom.
The sources cite the philosopher Bernard Williams here, who discussed the concept of exhaustible categorical desires. The idea is that the things that give you deep meaning, writing a book, raising a child, mastering a skill, traveling the world, are finite.
They have an endpoint.
Right. If you have forever, eventually you check every single box on your bucket list. You learn every language. You read every book. Does eternal life inevitably devolve into a profound, inescapable, crushing boredom?
It's the ultimate existential dread. Living forever, but having absolutely nothing left to live for. And there's also scientific pushback to this entire premise. There's a study from the journal Nature mentioned in the text that argues human beings have a hardwired biological ceiling.
The researchers argue that we are not immortal jellyfish.
Which sounds obvious, but it's important.
Right. There is a species of jellyfish, and organisms like the hydra, that can constantly regenerate their cells and essentially live indefinitely. But they are incredibly simple organisms. Humans are complex mammals. Evolution optimized our biology for a medium-sized lifespan, specifically focused on reaching reproductive age and raising offspring to independence.
So once we pass that reproductive utility, evolution kind of stops caring about us. It wants us to get out of the way.
Exactly. The genetic programming is incredibly tight. The nature researchers argue that while you can use protocols like Blueprint to optimize your health, compress morbidity, and hit that biological ceiling gracefully, maybe living a very healthy life until 100 or 110, you cannot just break through that ceiling without fundamentally ceasing to be human.
During the Jubilee debate on this topic, One of the skeptics delivers a really striking poetic line. They say, life's finitude breeds its meaning.
It is a powerful counterargument. The assertion is that the deadline of death is precisely what gives our choices emotional urgency and moral weight.
Right. If you have literally forever to apologize to a friend you wronged, or to write that novel you've been thinking about, or to tell someone you love them,
Mm-hmm.
do you ever actually do it? Or do you just put it off for another century? Does having an unavoidable deadline make the project of life matter? I think that's such a beautiful, haunting question.
Johnson's counterargument is equally compelling, though, and it's worth laying out. He synthesizes sociological research showing that humans do not actually derive meaning from the looming threat of death. Meaning comes from a state of well-being, autonomy, and deep social connection.
Okay, so feeling good and being connected.
Exactly. He asks, essentially, if you are completely healthy, completely pain-free, mentally sharp, and deeply engaged with the world and the people you love, do you ever wake up on a Tuesday and say, I wish I had less time? He believes extending life doesn't dilute meaning. It exponentially expands the canvas on which we can create it.
So we have these monumental, species-altering questions sitting on the table. AGI potentially arriving by 2029. Nuclear reactors being spun up to power our artificial thoughts, biohacking our way out of the grave to live until 2039 and beyond. We're desperately trying to mathematically engineer the perfect immortal human. The future is hurtling toward us at breakneck speed, which makes the final section of our sources so completely fascinating and honestly a little heartbreaking.
It really is a sharp turn.
Because with all this intense focus on the years 2026, 2029, and 2039, why is the internet right now absolutely obsessed with the year 2016?
It is a dramatic, jarring shift in focus. But sociologically, it is a crucial piece of the puzzle we are putting together today. The sources detail a massive viral social media trend currently sweeping Gen Z and younger millennials. The trend is simply 2026 is the new 2016.
It is a profound, almost desperate wave of cultural nostalgia. And the glossary of pop culture moments from 2016 provided in our sources is just a wild trip down memory lane. Let's just list a few of them to really get the visceral feeling of that year. You had the launch of the very first Apple AirPods, which completely changed how we interact with audio in public.
You had the water bottle flipping challenge taking over every middle school on the planet.
You had the all-female Ghostbusters reboot that sparked these massive early internet culture wars. You had Harambe the Gorilla becoming an absurd cultural icon.
Beyoncé dropping the Lemonade visual album.
The premiere of Stranger Things on Netflix tapping into 80s nostalgia. And of course, the absolute undeniable global mania of Pokemon Go.
We really have to ask the psychological question here. Why are people currently yearning for this specific, eclectic mix of events? The analysis in the text suggests it is a massive, collective coping mechanism.
A coping mechanism for what?
For the acceleration we've spent the last hour discussing. The world of 2026, as depicted in the sources, feels overwhelmingly heavy. The internet is increasingly saturated with AI-generated slop synthetic text and images that make it hard to know what is real. Political polarization is at a fever pitch. We're reading about supply chain wars over dysprosium and terbium to build robot armies.
Right.
The sheer, unrelenting velocity of technological and geopolitical change is causing a society-wide collective dissociation.
People are retreating to a decade ago because the present feels too complicated and the future feels too daunting. But here is the massive reality check that the sources bring up. 2016 wasn't actually a peaceful, carefree utopia.
Not at all.
The text reminds us that 2016 was an incredibly volatile year. It was the year of the Brexit vote, which completely fractured European politics. It was the year Donald Trump was elected, which changed global political dynamics forever. We had the terrifying Zika virus outbreak, and it was a year of profound, relentless cultural mourning. In 2016, we lost absolute legends: David Bowie, Prince, Alan Rickman, Muhammad Ali, George Michael, and Carrie Fisher.
So if 2016 was actually highly politically volatile, frightening, and marked by immense grief, what is the nostalgia actually for? What are people truly longing for?
I think this is where we tie the whole deep dive together. The nostalgia for 2016 isn't really about the specific events themselves. It's about what those events allows us to experience, making peace with human connection.
Yeah.
Think about the mechanics of Pokemon Go for a second. It wasn't just a video game. It was a phenomenon of spatial convergence. Millions of people all over the world simultaneously walking outside into physical parks. Yes, they were looking at their phones, but they were talking to total strangers. They were running together across a field because someone shouted there was a Charizard. It was a shared, unifying, physically messy, slightly silly experience.
Or think about the collective mourning when David Bowie or Prince died. The entire world paused to listen to the same music, to share the same grief, to reflect on the same cultural impact. It was a moment of deep, shared human resonance.
We are contrasting Bryan Johnson's hyper-optimized, algorithm-driven future blueprint, where you sit alone in a perfectly temperature-controlled room, eating a mathematically perfect vegan puree at exactly 11:00 a.m. with the messy, uncontrolled physical reality of playing Pokemon Go in a crowded park, eating a hot dog, and laughing with a stranger. Gen Z is desperately yearning for a time when humanity was allowed to just be imperfectly, spontaneously together.
That is the vital, profound insight here. As we stand on the precipice of an artificial general intelligence future, as we seriously scientifically debate the thermodynamics of biological immortality and spinning up nuclear reactors to feed data centers, we have to remember why we are doing any of this.
Right.
The ultimate value of extending human life, the ultimate value of building an artificial superintelligence to cure our diseases, isn't just to accumulate more years on a biological clock or compute more data in a server farm.
Exactly. It's so we can actually stay around to experience those uniquely human moments.
Yeah.
The messy, nostalgic, culturally resonant connections that an algorithm simply cannot feel.
We started this hour talking about finding value in the neurodivergent mind, realizing that what society thought was a flaw, refusal to conform, is actually the very strength we need to navigate the future. We talked about finding a way to power our massive technological ambitions without destroying the Earth, making peace with our physical and ecological limits, and we talked about trying to defeat cellular entropy to save our biological vessels.
Right. From valuing the non-playbook mind to building nuclear energy for AI to hacking our own biology. It is all one giant story about optimization. But the fierce, sudden nostalgia of 2016 is a loud cultural warning siren reminding us of what we're supposed to be optimizing for.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over. Imagine we actually get there. Imagine that by 2039, an artificial superintelligence successfully models the fundamental physics of our entire world. Imagine it solves the complex equations, it cures the diseases that plague us, and it helps humanity achieve biological longevity escape velocity.
If that miraculous future happens, it won't be just because we built enough data centers or mined enough rare earth metals or successfully outcomputed the universe.
No, it will be because we finally learned to see the profound value in the beautiful, messy, rule-breaking, nostalgic humanity we already possess. We have to make peace with who we are today to survive the future we are rapidly building for tomorrow.
That is the ultimate challenge.
Yeah.
So, to you listening, if science and artificial intelligence actually grant you an infinite horizon, what will you do with your tomorrow's tomorrow?
A question very much worth keeping in mind.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Question your playbooks, find the value in the noise, and make peace with whatever future comes next. We'll catch you next time.